Welcome in to the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter, and I'm joined as always by my cousin Shane, who goes by Big Orange Vols on Twitter. What are you up to, you big Tennessee homer?
Hey, buddy, what's going on?
Oh, man, I don't know if you can sense it, Shane, but SEC media's right around the corner. I'm getting excited. How about you, brother?
Yeah, hell yeah, I'm excited. I'm on there. I'm already Googling what restaurants to eat down there. I was like, I got on the open table, and I was like, do I need to set a reservation for any of these? But just kidding. You and I know both that we ain't going to have time really to do anything, but I'm really excited about it. I'm pumped up about it, actually, because it does kick off, in my mind, kicks off college football because we finally get to talk real content. We get to see some of these players. We get to hear some comments from the coaches and answer some of these rumors we keep hearing, brother.
Yeah, no doubt. So officially 2 weeks from today, as the audience is getting this, we'll be down there in Atlanta covering everything SEC football. Debut for the podcast being down there. Could not be more excited, Shane. But, hey, we've got to continue our march to Atlanta with some SEC team previews. We've got Auburn on deck. That's who we're going to cover on this episode. But before we do that, Shane, we're going to talk a little SEC expansion? Question mark? And any thoughts, Shane? I know you missed it. I joked when I did the Florida preview. You just didn't have the heart to jump on here and talk positively about them Florida Gators, who I gave an optimistic 10-2 record, again, with my orange and blue glasses on. Thoughts on the Gators going 10-2?
Can we do a quick rundown of the schedule? It's funny you said that because when we started this podcast, I was like, who are we previewing today? And he said Auburn. I was like, oh, okay. I was hoping it wasn't Florida. And he's like, oh, we already did that one. I was like, I was wondering why I was getting all those comments on Twitter about it, and I was just messing. But I had to step away from that one. 10-2, Florida Gators optimistic. Can you give me a quick rundown? Because I'd like to give you my positive outlook for them Florida Gators.
Yeah, no doubt, Shane. So right out the gate, huge season opener game here. I guess a team many have pegged as a top 10 opponent. Utah comes to the Swamp. Utah at Florida.
Top 10 what? Like football team? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Utah's one of those teams that gets a lot of hype, but they also get punched in the mouth when they usually face an SEC team. I expect no different here with the Florida Gators, 1-0.
Now, week 2, Kentucky comes to town. That's a tricky game, crossroads for both these programs, but I gave the edge to Florida in this one. What about you?
Yeah, we're being optimistic here. We talked about Kentucky a few days ago, and I'm very high on them. I think they got a good ball club. I'm not saying this is quite a 50-50 game, but you look the way these teams have played the last few years, it's hard to say it's not a coin toss. So if I'm being optimistic, I'm going to lean Florida here just to get them to 2-0.
Now, week 3, again, another home game. 3 home games right out the gate here. South Florida. I mean, come on. Get the hell out of here with that, right?
Get out of here. There's only one Florida team that's going to win this game, and it's the University of Florida, 3-0.
Now, let's see if you can take your bias hat off here, Shane. Week 4 at Tennessee. Ooh, doggy. Them Vols are circling this game as a win this season, but I just can't do it, Shane. After watching the history of this damn game the last couple of decades, I gave the edge to Florida. I don't care where the game's being played.
Well, Mike, this is where they get their first loss. No. I want to be optimistic for him, okay? And if you want to be optimistic about Florida, just look at what they do. I mean, even last year, a horrible year, they still beat us, Right. So I think that little psychological edge that they have over the University of Tennessee, until you see it, it's hard to bet against it. So, yeah, give me Florida undefeated at this point. Now, remember, Vol fans, I know there's a few listen. I'm being extremely optimistic here because I think that they've got talent. I'm putting a lot of confidence in AR-15. And you want to talk about a quarterback that's shined, I guarantee it's going to be during this game because it always happens against Tennessee.
Now, next game, another laugher. Eastern Washington comes to the Swamp. They may not leave it alive. You know what?
Yeah, we don't even know where the hell that is, Mike. So go ahead and put them down for a loss. Eastern Washington. They made that one up. That's like that fake school that got in there and played that high school team, ain't it?
Now, this could be a tricky one, Shane. Missouri. It is at home in the Swamp, but Missouri, hell, they played Florida very tight. Historically, this was last time at the Swamp, this was the brawl game, and of course Missouri beat Florida last year with the Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker saber came out. So I don't want to quite call this a rivalry, but hell, this is usually a pretty good game.
No, it would have had, I think, a little bit more luster if Coach was still down there, Mullins. But that was the rivalry. It was between those two guys. This one's going to be a little bit different. And if Florida is living on a perfect season right now, it's again on the shoulders of their quarterback. And I think at this point in the year, they've got their identity figured out. So I like Mizzou, and we're going to get to them, but optimistically in Gainesville, I can't find them winning that game. So give me Florida with the win here.
Now, this could be a tricky one, Shane. LSU, but it is in the Swamp. It's very difficult to know what to make of the Tigers, but again, I gave the edge to Billy Napier and company getting that game at home. This is one of the best rivalries in the SEC.
Again, man, this is one of these coin toss games we talk about. The fact that it's later in the season, I'm leaning a little bit more toward Florida anyway. But this is going to be a great game. I would love to find out that they made this a homecoming game again, crank up this rivalry, make it – because let's face it, it doesn't matter who's coaching, it doesn't matter who's playing. Typically, this game comes down to the final possession. Yeah. And let's just – being optimistic, let's pretend that Florida has that last drive. So give me the Gators.
Now, next game, Shay, we got a bit of good news, bad news. We got 2 weeks to prepare. But it's against them Bulldogs down there from Georgia in Jacksonville. So I can't talk myself into saying Florida's going to win this game. Can you?
Mike, there's a handful of teams in this country that you can never expect a victory against, and that's the Georgia Bulldogs. They're too loaded, talented. Their third string would give just about anybody in the SEC a ball game if given the opportunity. So I don't think Florida's got it. Now I think they're building something. I think there is starting to get a little bit of that recruiting buzz, and if they're undefeated up to this point, watch out. They may have some studs coming up on their rosters in years to come, but they just don't have it now. So I don't see them going toe to toe with the Georgia Bulldogs. So give me the Bulldogs in this one.
Now, next game, pretty tough, Shane, at Texas A&M. This is where I had Florida losing their second game of the season. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm going to have to agree with you here because this is one of those other teams that I was talking about, real national champ contenders here, and coming off that defeat with the rivalry, I don't know. They're going to be hungover. It's going to be a tough game to bounce back. You talk about a tough 2-game stretch. That's this ball club's got one. So Florida gets their second loss here with Texas A&M. Yeah,
that makes the next game all the more important. Shane, South Carolina, they do come to the Swamp, so the Gators going to have that home field advantage. But how many times have we seen a team kind of stumble a little bit and then it, one loss turns to 2, turns to 3. So by no means is South Carolina going to be a gimme, but I gave the edge, again, optimistic looking here, to the Florida Gators. What are your thoughts?
Mike, this is when it comes down to coaching and it comes down to seniority. It comes down to the locker room. It comes back to who's leading this ball club and who can get them fired. Because when you come off 2 tough games, and you and I both expect losses during those 2 matchups, that they got to quickly get galvanized in that locker room, or it's going to get they're going to have a hungover, and they're going to lose their 3rd straight game. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give the boys credit, though. I'm going to say that there is enough seniority in that locker room, enough leadership to come out, get these boys back on track. So Florida with the win against South Carolina.
Now, next game at Vanderbilt, Shane, I said the only hope the Commodores got is maybe a blizzard rolls through, because this game's late November here in Nashville. Crazier things have happened, right?
No, nothing. I think you're asking. I mean, come on. I know it's Christmas, but it's a little too early for miracles, Mike. Vanderbilt is not winning that game.
Then the last game of the season at Florida State, rivalry game, but hell, them Gators, I don't care who the coach is. They own the Seminoles, you know what?
Yeah, and you saw that passion last year when these 2 teams – I mean, Florida had a terrible season, but I've never seen a team fight harder late in the season, because the rivalry is true and it means a lot to them down there. So Florida's humming at this point. They're going to probably a New Year's Bowl game at this point.
Yeah, so 10-2. I mean, who wouldn't take that first year of the Billy Napier era? We've got kind of the same optimistic style record here for the Florida Gators, but certainly that first month of the season is rough. But if you navigate it, you could see the makings of a special season here down in Gainesville.
That's the thing. This is a sleeping giant, and you would like to keep them sleeping if you're not a Gator fan.
Right.
This is a team that doesn't need momentum, and if they do find it, and let's say AR does take that step forward, there's a lot of 50-50 games on Florida's schedule that I could see going either way. Mm-hmm. But if we're being honest with ourselves, Mike, this is a ball club that could find themselves 10-2 at the end of the season. Out of all the optimism that we've put out here, I think this is the least crazy take, in my opinion.
And that's saying something.
Yeah, I mean, because to me, it's all about quarterback play, and you can have your returning running back percentages and the line, things that we go over. Mm-hmm. You can have all of that, but the true equalizer, is number 15. And is he the next Cam Newton? Is he the next Joe Burrow? Is he the next quarterback to just take over a ball club and take somebody from nothing to something? Because we could be at the end of the season looking at the Gators saying, wow, they are really damn good. Where did this guy come from? Where did this guy? Because AR-15 is going to make everybody around him better. But that's why I like I said, a sleeping giant. If they do take the step forward, it will be because of quarterback play, and they've got a hell of a quarterback to do it.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we get down to our Auburn Fall Camp Preview, Shane, let's hit on one of the most fun topics here in the off season that it really got kicked off a year ago, Shane, when Texas and Oklahoma jumped to the SEC. Now the Big Ten has finally answered with the expansion of their own. Of course, Southern Cal and UCLA. It's official already. 2024, they will be joining the Big Ten. And, man, so many – we had your little clip. I thought that was hilarious on the last episode. But, I mean, this is kind of ridiculous, isn't it, that we've got 2 Southern California teams now playing in a Northern League. And how about this, Shane? I've heard this, that UCLA and Cal, UCLA and USC, they are as close to Hawaii as they are to their next closest Big Ten opponent now, and that is Nebraska. So, this is a nightmare for if you want to keep things close together. You know what I mean?
It is. But that's what we're turning into, Mike. And we're growing. We've been talking about this for many, many years. That we knew the expansion was going to happen. We knew that there were going to be these super divisions of college football. I didn't quite expect USC and UCLA to be the ones, coming out east, but they did. Geography is not my strong suit, Mike, but But the fact of the matter is, we got Texas now. We got Mizzou in the Southeastern Conference. Yeah, as much as I like to give these boys shit in California, it's an arms race. It's like the Wild Wild West. Get what you can, put a flag in it, and claim your territory.
Right.
That's what's happening now between these two conferences. And I think it's a big get for them. I know that sounds crazy, but there's a market for those California teams. But I don't think it's going to be near like the SEC. But I don't know. It's interesting that they're not settled in, that they keep growing. So that makes me think that the SEC may be working on something here, and the fact that they're making it 2024. They're moving the timeline up. So do they know something we don't?
Well, I like to joke, Shane. I can't wait for Oregon and Washington to join the SEC. I mean, there's just to hell with all this geography. But, Oregon and Washington, two of the most, I would imagine, coveted programs out there. So let's play this little game here, Shane. If the SEC does have its eyes set on expansion, I think they're going to add 4 more teams. I really do. Because it's, the SEC is such a juggernaut that, you have to be playing chess while everybody's playing checkers, so to speak. They did that last year when they brought in Texas and Oklahoma. And here's the biggest thing that I'm looking at, Shane, because everybody's circling Notre Dame to the Big Ten and maybe Cal and Stanford and all these academic programs. Right. I think the Big Ten, if they really want to get savvy and smart, Shane, what they've got to do is the southern schools break in to the southern footprint to get where the SEC is just completely dominant. So you may be sitting here saying, well, why in the hell would the SEC add a Clemson or a Florida State? We already got those markets covered. But what you don't want is a Big Ten to gobble them up, and then all of a sudden, the SEC country is now Big Ten country too. So, I think the SEC's really got to be proactive here and try to get some of these, these elite brands to join the SEC. What are your thoughts on that?
Mike, you hit the nail on the head. We have to be extremely careful now. Our next move shouldn't be emotional. They should be psychological here, because one of the things that you notice with USC and with UCLA, forget the programs. Look at the location. These guys and kids that are growing up in Los Angeles, these kids that are growing up in San Diego, they're going to be watching Big Ten football from here on out. So there is going to be a natural drive or an underlying respect for the conference that's in their own state. A lot of people look at the SEC and they talk about our dominance. Well, we're dominant because of where we're recruiting, man. We're recruiting in Florida. We're recruiting in Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia. That's where a lot of our talent is coming from. That's why we're more talented than the Big Ten. But if the Big Ten decides to expand and plant their flag in Florida or plant their flag in South Carolina, they start taking some of our eyes off the SEC and start looking at the Big Ten again. So I think you're right, man. You got to be really careful because as they continue to grow, not only should we grow, but we should also stop them from expanding into our territory. And I know that sounds crazy but it's a pipeline, brother. You take such those old NCAA games, man. You want to turn that state blue so that you can start recruiting there. But that's exactly what Big Ten is going to be able to do now. And there's a lot of freaking talent coming from California. Hell, look at Tennessee, prize quarterback, California. How many other talents coming from California? And if the Big Ten can add a little bit of luster to their program by putting a couple programs in there, then you got to be careful. You got to take notice.
Right. Yeah, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Bryce Young from California. Matt Corral just led Ole Miss to the Sugar Bowl from California.
Right.
Many, many others, leaving that state. Maybe they stay now that Southern Cal and UCLA is in a better league. But so let me ask you, the one everybody – hey, you love to hate this program, but they are the biggest name out there that is not associated with any conference. Notre Dame, Shane. Would you be in favor of the SEC? Like I said, everybody thinks Notre Dame's jumping to the Big Ten. I mean, how bold of a move would it for the SEC to steal the Fighting Irish right out from under the Big Ten? Would you be in favor of Notre Dame, or would you more want to see that the SEC really want to stay in the region?
No, and here's why. The more that we talk about this California, the more I'm thinking, why don't we have a presence up north? Because really, geography doesn't matter anymore. Money doesn't matter. We can send these teams whatever. It does suck for the fans, because a common fan having to drive to L.A. to watch a football game, you know what I'm saying, from Ann Arbor, Michigan, that ain't cheap, brother. You know, you can't Uber that one. So that's the thing that I hate about it is it's just, you know, they're not taking, but more and more people are watching on TV, and that's what's driving this thing is Disney anyway. So I think I like the North idea, just so that we can kind of plant our flag up there and take some eyes off of the Big Ten. But God, I just hate Notre Dame. You know what I'm saying? That's especially this year, they knocked my boys out of the. So I don't know, Mike. That's a tough question. Do you have four teams in mind? Are we going to go through this?
Yeah. So let's talk about our top four here, Shane. And, you know, one that I think you know, the Gamecocks won't be happy to hear it, but again, you have to think about the future of the SEC. You've got to keep this program away from the Big Ten. I think the number one team on the docket you've got to land is the Clemson Tigers. What about you?
Yeah, number one, Clemson, without a doubt. It's a national brand. A lot of people love Clemson, so I think bringing them into the fold only helps the SEC instead of hurting.
Now, how about this one, Shane? A little bit, you know, obviously a big name, but not a elite football program. But I think it could be in the SEC, and it expands the conference's footprint into a new state. Number two on my board, Shane, I'd go after the North Carolina Tar Heels. How about you?
I like the Tar Heels, especially because of a multi-sport situation. I mean, it would be awesome to see Kentucky and North Carolina playing basketball every year, which, you know, typically they find their way on that path anyway. But I think that would be good. But I don't know if that's the ACC team that I would want to bring over. I get the concept bringing North Carolina, but I think the Carolinas would be covered with South Carolina and Clemson. I'm thinking like a Virginia Tech. Here's a program that has a ton of fan support. It's an electric stadium atmosphere. It fit right in with the SEC. I got to see it firsthand in Bristol when we went up there and Tennessee played at the Bristol Motor Speedway. It was freaking awesome. Fans were great. We got to talk to a lot of them. We got to make fun of them, a lot of them, when we were going back to our little camper. But I tell you what, it was an electric atmosphere, and that's a new state. There's a lot of talent coming out of Virginia. So I don't know. I'm leaning a little more. If I'm going to take someone else from the ACC, give me Virginia Tech.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw this, Shane, but I put this out on Twitter because someone was, you know, they're very confused about why North Carolina would even consider something like this with, you know, how great. Every time you hear North Carolina, you go straight to their basketball program. Right. It's arguably the top basketball program in the country, Shane, but their football team makes more than twice what their basketball program makes. And they don't even have a good football program. So, I mean, you just cannot look at any of this through a basketball lens. I mean, it would be great to add a brand like that. But if that was very valuable, Kansas would, you know, they would have a home right now in a much better league. But it just is basically a non-factor when you're talking about all this realignment.
I'll tell you what, if Mac Brown wasn't 95 years old and had a computer and heard you say that on his podcast, he'd come over and whoop your ass, Mike.
Now, how about what other shade? This one's got to be in my top four. I don't know about you, but I'm putting Florida State with, you know, their rich tradition, and they have, you know, I know they've been struggling the last couple of years, but they have a fan base that supports that program when they're good. Which hell, our entire childhoods they were, one of the top teams in the country, and the fans sell that thing out. I think you got to go after Florida State as well.
Well, I'm going to the state of Florida, Mike, but I don't want the Seminoles anymore. I think I would in the 90s, in the 2000s, but we're in a new chapter of college football, and this NIL, the thing I love about it is the fact that Miami loves to spend money. And I do think there should be another team in Florida. I think it'd just be better for the SEC. So at this moment, I know it sounds crazy, and I know it doesn't got a ton of fan support down there, but damn, I'm telling you, when they were hitting, brother, when Miami was on top, that stadium was packed 24/7. So, and I think they're on their way up, especially with this money. So give me Miami. I think if we're talking next 20, 30 years, who's a better football program, I'm thinking it's the Hurricanes. I don't think it's the Seminoles. I think their day's done.
Wow. I can't believe you said that, Shane.
I know.
After I bashed Miami relentlessly the last couple of weeks.
I know, but think about it. We've been talking about all these marquee games every year. Now, obviously, it's not been good for the Hurricanes, but we've built it up every single year, and it's never disappointed. It was always a fun and entertaining game. Mm-hmm. People want Miami to be good again. And the fact that, you got to remember why they were good to begin with, because of boosters and the shenanigans going on down there. Now you kind of gave them a little bit of an outlet, and you're seeing these recruits already starting to flock down there. It's just a matter of time before they're good again. So let's capitalize on it, and let's watch some good football along the way.
Now, for my fourth, Shane, I'm right there with you with Virginia Tech. I would ask them to come to the SEC. I think they're a perfect fit for what the SEC is and those fans. But since you already mentioned them, I don't want to double up and make this a little bit more interesting. Yep. Many different ways we could go, Shane. Again, I kind of joke about it, but Oregon would be a hell of an addition.
Right.
Of course, they don't really fit into the SEC, so I would understand not inviting them. I think another great fan base, their program's not been as good, but I think it's because of the league they're in. I think West Virginia makes a lot of sense. I would welcome them to the SEC, so that's a candidate. How about Oklahoma State, Shane? They've been pretty solid. Yeah. They've actually been better than Texas the last couple of years in the Big 12. You got Baylor out there. You got NC State. You got Virginia. Is any of these teams I'm throwing out at you, any of them more attractive than the rest in your mind?
Well, a couple of them. I do like the West approach. I think we got enough on the East. So I'm ruling out teams like West Virginia. Nothing against them, but that cathedral will never be filled like an SEC one would. I just don't think they have the buzz. I don't think they have the market. I may be wrong. It's not like I'm really good at research anyway. I'm sure somebody will hit me with a stat saying, "Did you realize they made $1.8 trillion off that oil field or something?" I don't know. But here's the thing, Mike. I think you started off the show with the perfect team, and that's Notre Dame. Here's a team that not only has the national support, it has money. It has a stadium that people want to visit and see Touchdown Jesus. It's just there's so much going on. They would fit so well in that SEC pregame, tailgate experience. So if I'm leaning anywhere, it's up north, and it's the Fighting Irish.
Always knew you were a Golden Domer in your heart.
Ever since Rudy, it's like I kept waiting for my shot. I tried to get on the lawn care service here at Tennessee just so I'd get one opportunity to play, but no. I think just marketing. Now, it would make sense for another Texas program. You mentioned Baylor, Houston maybe. I don't know if you want to consider Baylor. I think Baylor would probably be your best route out there. Oklahoma State, this is a program that finds its way in the top 25 a lot, not just in football, but in other sports. They put a lot of talent in the NFL. It's another team out west, so it makes sense to me. But I'm leaning pretty hard Notre Dame if we're doing anything. Now, if we're getting crazy and getting extreme, yeah, sure, let's head out west. Let's get a couple of those teams. It sucks that USC has already signed the dotted line in UCLA, because if I were picking 2 California teams, those are the 2 I'd want,
Right.
But, it's the next chapter, brother. Do you think we hear something about this expansion? I mean, Big Ten can't be the only one making headlines, not with media days right around the corner.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, here's the one thing I left off. I did touch on it on the last show, Shane. The ACC's got something that's called Grant of Right deal. And they're basically, what that means is they're signed on with the ACC until 2036. And if they leave, their punishment is every TV dollar they make until 2036 goes to the ACC. So, ooh. I mean, they're kind of like locked in there. But now I've heard rumor and speculation that these ACC schools are, they got their lawyers involved and they're trying to see if they can get out of this deal, because I think it says something like, that deal is only worth anything if the ACC, as long as it's still a power conference. So I think they could maybe argue that the SEC and the Big Ten are the only power conferences left. So, I think it all hinges on that, to be honest with you, because no one is going to leave if they get no TV dollars for decades on end. Yeah. You know what I mean?
So how do you think this plays out, man? I mean, so when it's all said and done, Big Ten will have, 18?
I think right now they're at 16, just like the SEC.
Yeah, but
I think they're each going to add at least 4 more.
Okay.
To get to 20.
That's crazy to me. So SEC with 20, Big 10 with 20, or Big 20, whatever they want to call it now. And then do you think there's a reshuffle of these other programs? I still think there's going to be 3 conferences when it's all said and done.
Well, it sounds like the Big 12 is trying to gobble up some of the Pac-12 that's out there. So I think that's kind of realistically what will happen. The Big 12 will gobble up teams like Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. And then the Big 10, we'll see where they go. But Oregon, Washington, Stanford.
Do you see ACC expanding?
No, I think they're going to die. Mm-hmm. Because I think the SEC is going to find a way to gobble them up. At least they're better programs,
Right. Yeah. It's going to be interesting, man. 20 years from now, we're going to be looking back and remembering the good old days.
Exactly.
Oh, shit. Driving to Oregon to watch Auburn play.
For the West Division Championship.
The West Divisional Championship. Oh, my gosh. Man, you better go see the SEC stadiums now, Mike, because it's about to get ridiculous.
But, hey, we've got a preview to get to, Shay. We could talk hypotheticals all night long here. But right. Let's jump into the Auburn Tigers, Shane, where, again, we're putting in our optimism. We're putting in our blue and orange glasses here when we talk about the Auburn Tigers, who went 6-7 last year, 6th in the SEC West, lost to Houston in the Birmingham Bowl. But, man, we got to remember, Shay, this was a team in November, controlled their own destiny in the West, could have beat Alabama, should have beat them, really. They held the lead there with 3 minutes left, I believe it was, in the Birmingham Bowl. They were up 28-3 on Mississippi State before it all came crashing down on them.
Right.
I mean, this is a razor-thin margin here. I know they won 6 games, but it could very easily been a 9-10 win season, and then we're sitting here saying, my God, Brian Harsin, he may be the best coach in the SEC. It's wild how that can flip on you in a heartbeat. You know what?
Well, Auburn was such a frustrating team, and it has been for a couple of years for me anyway, especially when you gamble, because it was so tough thinking, all right, man, this is they found themselves. They found their identity. They're back on track. This is the Auburn Tigers I grew up watching. Mm-hmm. Here we go. And then they just shit the bed. That's just it was just a wild roller coaster and of ups and downs. And this year I think we'll have a little bit more stability, but we're going to have new coaches. We're going to have new players. It's not going to look the same that it has in years past. So I'm going to be optimistic the best I can on this show, Mike. But you know me, I've been a poo-pooer of Auburn for a couple months now. So, but I'm getting my optimistic hat on, and I'm ready to talk some war damn Eagle.
Well, we've got a number of staff changes over the offseason. Of course, Shane, both coordinators have been replaced. Our new coordinator, Eric Casal, he was your receivers coach last season. And honestly, I don't know a ton about this guy, Shane, but I did some research. And look at some of the guys he's coached. When he was at Cal, he coached Deshaun Jackson. He coached Keenan Allen. He coached Marvin Jones. I mean, these are like stud players in the NFL. Mm-hmm. He coached receivers at Colorado, some guy named Scotty McKnight. And you may be saying, well, who the hell is Scotty McKnight? Well, all he is, Shane, Colorado's all-time leader in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. So, hey, I take away from that, Shane, that Auburn's new offensive coordinator, he knows what the hell he's doing when it comes to coaching receivers. And that has been an issue there at Auburn for a little while. So I feel like the receivers are in good hands, at least with our new coordinator. And on the defensive side, Shane, Jeff Schmedding.
Well, Mike, didn't they also add Ike down there?
Yes, sir. So we've got a new receivers coach, Ike Hilliard. All SEC fans know that name. He's been he was a first-round pick out of the Florida Gators under Steve Spurrier. He's been coaching in the NFL for 11 seasons. I mean, you combine those two, hell, Auburn should have the best receivers in the country. You know what?
Hey, dude, these guys have invested some time and some money into making that, especially that position group, better. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you look the years past, that's where they failed miserably.
Right. Now, we've got some turnover on the defensive side, Shane. The defensive coordinator, Jeff Schmedding, he was Auburn linebacker coach last year, but he had been a defensive coordinator previously at Eastern Washington. He's been with Brian Harsin for a number of years. So, again, he's another guy I don't know a ton about, but hell, Brian Harsin knows him. Brian Harsin trusts him. That should be good enough for them diehard Auburn fans. But now with Schmedding moving up to coordinator, they had to hire a new defensive line and linebackers coach, but they hired Christian Robinson, Shane, who was former Florida linebacker coach under Dan Mullen. He's been a coach at Georgia, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and he even turned down Michigan to be his final season there at Florida. So this is a young coach that is known as a recruiter. I think Auburn made a hell of a hire here getting Christian Robinson to be the new linebackers coach.
Oh, yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, recruiting.
Yep.
Because that's what he's going to be doing a lot of.
And their new defensive line coach, Shane, another familiar name to SEC fans, Jimmy Brumbaugh. He was an all-SEC defensive lineman at Auburn, so he's coming home. He coached the defensive line at Tennessee under Jeremy Pruitt. Unfortunately, he got fired in the middle of the year there. But he's coached Kentucky's defensive line. He's coached Colorado's defensive line. So, hey, not a bad – it's always great to welcome home a former standout player, and that's what the Tigers are getting in Jimmy Brumbaugh, the new defensive line coach.
Absolutely. I mean, it means more to those coaches.
Exactly.
You see this in other programs. You talk about just galvanizing a locker room. It's a guy that's been there before and played in front of these types of fans. So I think it's important to have a little home cooking.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we talk about Auburn's returning production, Shane, here's where we get, it's a little inconsistent up and down here because we're returning only 27% of our passing yards, of course, with Bo Nix transferring out to Oregon. TJ Finley is the leading returning passer with 827 passing yards. Mm-hmm. But here's where our bread's going to be buttered, Shane, at Auburn this year. Rushing. 89% of the rushing yards are returning with Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter back for another year on the Plains. This is going to be an offense that has got to be led on the ground because we don't even know who the quarterback is going to be this fall. But, hell, you can't do any better than Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter as your 1-2. You know what?
No, I think this is one of the best running back groups in the country. And obviously it has been a strong suit for many, many years, but we're going to need that quarterback room to step up so that he can have a little access to that secondary, because right now they're going to keep loading those 8, 9 in the box.
Mm-hmm. Now, receiving yards, we're returning only 58%. Shed Jackson, he was our leading returning receiver. So, again, it's always dangerous, Shane, when you don't know who your quarterback is, you don't know who your receivers, at least your standouts, are going to be. So, a lot of unknown with the Auburn Tigers. But, again, hey, we're not focusing on the negative, Shane. We're focusing on the positive. And the offensive line returned 77% of their starts, 4 of 5 on the offensive line starters returning for the Tigers. So, again, you factor in the experience on the offensive line and the running backs. This could be an elite year on the ground for the Tigers.
No, like I said, this is going to be their bread and butter, but everybody knows that in the SEC. So
right.
The fact that we've got some unknowns could be playing in their favor. I think about LSU a few years ago, and I'm not saying Auburn's going to win a national championship or anything, but there was a lot of question marks about the type of offense they're going to be running and some of the players that are going to be playing, and questions at quarterback. There's a lot of similarities there. There's talent on this roster, and maybe a little bit of that unknown is not a bad deal.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the defensive side, Shane, we returned 45% of our tackles, 54% of our tackles for loss. Now, here's a key, 72% of our sacks. So, hey, that's critical for a defense, and only 44% of the interceptions. So, a lot of production lost on that defensive side of the ball, but we still got Derek Hall with his 9 sacks and his 12.5 tackles for loss returning. There is talent on defense, but again, man, a lot of lost production. There's going to be a lot of guys that got to step up this year for the Tigers defense.
But how many times has Auburn done that, Mike? I mean, how many times have we got to the end of the season and say, oh, shit, who's this guy? You know what I'm saying? They always find talent in Auburn. It never surprised you. Just look at the NFL drafts.
Mm-hmm. Now, man, the list of transfers, Shane, is a wild one. So outgoing transfers, I'm just going to mention all these guys that left. Bo Nix, of course. Kobe Hudson, the receiver, to Central Florida. Sean Shivers, the running back, to Indiana. Offensive lineman Tayshawn Manning to Kentucky. Ladarius Tennyson to Ole Miss. J.J. Pegues to Ole Miss. Ian Matthews to Missouri. Lee Hunter to Central Florida. Elijah Cannon, Purdue. Roe Torrance, Arizona State. Amari Harvey to Georgia Tech. And Jay Hardy to Liberty. That is a lot of talent and experience off the Auburn roster. But then they turned around and added a bunch of transfers too. So, of course, the big one, Zach Calzada, Texas A&M starting quarterback, last year threw for a little over 2,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, and started 10 games for the Aggies. And they also added from Oregon, Robbie Ashford, who was an Alabama native from Hoover High. He was the spring game MVP. You take that with a grain of salt because you can't put too much into a spring game, but he certainly looked the part. So our quarterback room is, getting some fresh faces in there.
The old spring game MVP,
That's always on someone's bio, like 20 years down the road.
No, I think I have that in my bio,
They desperately needed help at the receiver position, Shay. They added Coy Moore, former LSU. He had 22 catches, 177 yards in 10 games. They added a receiver, Warsham, from Miami, who's another Alabama native. In high school, check out his stats, Shane. Incredible. 215 catches, 2,400 receiving yards, 28 touchdowns. He's only played one game in college, but hell, I like this theme, and that's the same thing they did with the Oregon defensive lineman Jason Jones, former touted Alabama native, returning home after 2 seasons at Oregon. They got, I love this guy, Morris Joseph from Memphis, a defensive lineman. He had, in 21 games, Shane, for Memphis, 90 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks. Can't beat that. They also added from Oregon DJ James, a defensive back, who 72 career tackles, 2 interceptions. One guy they love down there is a safety, Craig McDonald. They got him from Iowa State. 13 starts last year, 41 tackles, 10 tackles against them Sooners. They got a defensive lineman, Marcus Bragg from Western Kentucky, 27 tackles, 4 sacks last season. A linebacker from North Carolina, Eugene Asante, 62 tackles and played in 12 games last year. So that's kind of the rundown of the transfers they've added that I anticipate will make an impact this year. But again, it's hard to have so many guys incoming and leaving and going and knowing what the hell to even make of this roster. You know what?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, Mike. You're gonna find some diamonds in there. There's gonna be some that don't pan out, but you also had a lot of kids transfer out that weren't working out in Auburn, and part of the reasons why they were unsuccessful last season. So I'm not saying I don't like to blame it on the kids, but sometimes you got negative energy in that locker room, and you gotta cut that cancer out. So hopefully that's what Auburn did.
Mm-hmm. And the Tigers signed the SEC's number 9 recruiting class, Shane, and some of just the quick highlights of that. Robert Woodyard, number 13 linebacker in the country, Shane. They flipped him I believe it was on signing day, from Alabama. So he can play. Yeah. And then how about this, Shane? They really cleaned up the junior college ranks. Number 1 defensive lineman, Jeffrey Umba. Number 1 safety, Marquise Gilbert. Number 1 corner, Keontae Scott. So if you need impact from the junior college ranks, you get the best of the best in junior college. You can't do much better than number one, and number one. You know what?
Hey, and if they're not starting, they're still competitive depth. That's what I love about JUCOs. They got some of that sophomore weight on them already. They've got a little bit of that offseason with the Auburn weight crew. So I think they're going to be all right. But this is what you want to see, especially when you've got a lot of starters transferring out or going to the NFL or graduating. You want to reach into those JUCOs and bring some to your roster. So hopefully 1 or 2 of those will hit.
Now, ranking the offensive positions for the Auburn Tigers, Shane, again, I think it's got to be number 1, the running backs with Tank Bigsby, Jarquez Hunter, Sean Jackson. They added Central Michigan transfer Jordan Ingram last year, another transfer Justin Jones from UAB. But, we kind of already hit on it. The running backs have got to lead the way for the Auburn Tigers. There's no better unit probably in the entire team than the running backs.
Well, yeah, without a doubt, and expect more of a committee this year. I think, Tank really shines when he's not having to be one of those 30 rep cowbells. When he can come out there and just wear on a defense late in the game. That's when Tank really starts to shine. And with this offensive line, which I think you're about to get to, clear cut number 1 on this roster.
Oh, now you could put O-line right there. I'm going tight ends. I think they got, John Samuel Shanker. He's already got all the Auburn records, Shane, for receiving. So I love that. Luke Deal's a solid player. Tyler Fromm, brother of old Jake Fromm down there. He was a touted recruit. And Brandon Frazier. So they love to use tight ends down there at Auburn with this staff. And I think they got a couple good ones here.
When did tight ends stop becoming linemen? It's like growing up, a tight end was just a fast lineman. You know what I'm saying? One a little skinnier, can't quite put him at tackle. Let's put him out there, But all of a sudden, I missed that. I missed it. It was somewhere in the late 2000s, I think. Maybe, what was his name? Winslow or Shocker, one of those guys coming out. And we're like, oh, man, tight end's a position? They could do something else than blocking. So, no, I love the hybrid. I love what they do with tight ends, multiple tight end formations. I don't give them enough respect. I'm still calling them offensive line, though, so that's my lineman or my number 2.
Yeah, so lineman, that's right where I got them. Keandre Jones, Austin Troxel, Nick Brahms, Brandon Cancel. That is a solid foursome right there. Now we need to figure out, who's going to be our 5th starters. Is it going to be Alex Jackson, Killian Zaire, Jaleel Irvin? It's good to have flexibility here. We got 8 linemen we can go to war with here on the offensive line. So that's a solid experienced group right there.
Absolutely. And I'm expecting more from the wide receiver core. I know they're nowhere near your top 3 here, but they got speed, Mike. And that's what they went out there and got. And that's something you can't teach. So if we can get him and get the group with Calzada or get the group with Finley, whoever they decide to go with there, getting some good reps in, I expect more play from the quarterback and better play from the wide receivers here, especially with all that talent coaching them.
Yeah, and speaking of quarterbacks, so that's the next group I got. Zach Calzada, I think he's going to start. DJ Finley, Robbie Ashford, battling for the backup. And then they got a true freshman they really like, Holden Grenier. And then the receivers that you mentioned, Shane.
1 second. He's getting excited. Bruno, we're talking Auburn, not Tennessee. Calm down. He gets pumped up.
The receiver, Shane, Malcolm Johnson, he stood out in the spring. Javarius Johnson, he had his moments there. He was on our breakout candidate list. Ced Jackson, he was our leading returning receiver. Xavion Capers, been waiting for that guy to break out. He could be a huge breakout candidate. Jay Fair, Travarish, Dawson. There's your group there. It's some talented group, but, like I said, we've been waiting for a lot of these guys to break out. It just hasn't happened yet. And maybe that's in part because, we were lacking confidence in our quarterbacks here towards the tail end of the season. So if the quarterback play gets better, these receivers will certainly have a lot more production on the field.
For sure.
Now, the defense, Shane, I mean, you could basically put this in any order because we have got depth and talent at every unit here, but I'm going defensive back, Shane. Nehemiah Pritchard, Donovan Kaufman, Jalen Simpson, Zion Puckett, Marquise Gilbert, the transfer Craig McDonald, Austin Osbury, the freshman, and DJ James, the other transfer. We've got us a hell of a defensive backfield, and I think the group's that's gonna lead the way for Auburn's defense this season.
And it's deep, Mike. It's easy to get a couple of guys on the island out there, but you know what? Everybody needs a break every now and then. So I just like the depth that they've made here with the secondary, and that really shows later in the season.
Yeah, and the defensive line, we've got some star power with Derek Hall. I love him. I think he's one of the more underrated defensive linemen last season. Colby Wooten, who's our leading tackler. Marcus Harris. We've Jeffrey Umba, the number 1 junior college lineman. Jason Jones, the Oregon transfer. Morvis Joseph, the Memphis transfer. Don't forget Dylan Brooks. Was a guy supposed to be at Tennessee, but
who's that guy?
Once they fired Pruitt, he's back at Auburn. So, and Marquise Burke. So again, a very, very talented and deep defensive line here that is going to carry the Tigers this fall.
Yeah, and that's the position group that always shines when you talk Auburn football. There's always 1 or 2 of those guys that you see playing on Sunday.
And then last but not least here, again, linebackers. I mean, more star power. Owen Popo, touted recruit, been in the league a long, long time.
Is this the year? Is this the year for him?
I mean, it's got to be, right? So
yeah,
we've been waiting for him to be all SEC, and it just hadn't happened yet. So this has got to be the year. He came back for a reason. They got Eugene Asante, Wesley Steiner, Cam Riley, Joko Willis, and then Robert Woodyard, the guy they flipped from Alabama. That's the makings of a pretty good linebacking core right there.
Yeah, I think so too.
Now, we got no worry on special teams because we got Anders Carlson, 9th year in a row, Shay. We've got a Carlson down here kicking. That's all they do down there.
Are they just changing jerseys or something down there? It's like the same guy over and over. And the 8th year senior.
The punter, Oscar Chapman, was one of the best in the SEC last season. So we got no issues when it comes to special teams at Auburn. Which means, Shane, it is time to get to your favorite part of these team previews, breaking down the schedule. And, man, we have dissect this Auburn schedule all off-season long. So let's get right into it. Laffer, right out the gate. Mercer, I don't even know where the hell that is. Mercer comes out of Jordan Hare.
They should call it Mercy because they're going to need it, son. The Mercy rule at halftime. Auburn up 49-0 here. This is going to be a bloodbath. And what I love about it, right out of the gate, Mike, I think Calzada's their guy. I think we're going to look at this game and say, damn, they do got some wide receivers. Yeah. They've got some explosive plays on the outside, and that only helps their bread and butter, their running game, and they can lean on Tank, and they're not going to need them much during this game. 1-0, Auburn.
Now, week 2, another home game, Shane. San Jose State, which apparently is one of the better teams, whatever the league they're in, but good luck. They're going to need it here. You know what?
Well, there's a reason Big Ten didn't take this program, Mike, because nobody wants to go there. It's beautiful, I'm sure, but this is 2-0 easy.
Now
we're building confidence, baby. We're 2-0.
Here's a tricky one, Shane. Penn State comes to town.
Yes.
Week 3, you could make the case Auburn should have won last year at Penn State. There was some ref shenanigans up there, but hey, I think Auburn's got they've got a shot here against Penn State. What do you think?
I do too. There was parts of that game last year. It was extremely frustrating to watch because Auburn was the better football team, and they spin it as a Big Ten win. They spin it. I mean, it was just. I hated it. I hate everything about it. I hate James Franklin, obviously. I don't hate anybody, but I'm just kidding. I do. I hate that guy. I cannot stand him. Anchor down. Get the hell out of here. I think Auburn rights the ship here. I think they're rolling, brother. This is a game that they're not going to be expected to win, but 2-0 with that confidence. Calzada's he's getting comfortable back there with this new offense, and let's face it, not on the run. One of the things about Calzada last year, there was a lot of times he was constantly running around in that pocket. I don't think he's going to have to do that near as much with this offensive line and with a reliable running game of Tank and Committee. I think at this point we're going to find out that Calzada is an SEC quarterback. Give me 3-0. Penn State goes down.
Now a tricky game here. Missouri, although it is all in the plains, so many home games on this docket here, but this will be a huge one. The SEC opener. Coach Harsin, he cannot afford to lose to Missouri here.
Sneaky game, especially if we are 3-0. This is a game that you could easily overlook. This is one that you just kind of the energy comes down. You just beat the Nittany Lions on national TV, and everybody's excited. And how many times have we seen the following week a team that's well prepared, like Eli's boys, come in and beat somebody? So this one right here is going to be on the coaching staff. This is going to be on those players in the locker room to just make sure they stay focused at task at hand. It's every game. It's 1-0 each week. I know it's coach speak, but that's exactly what you got to do. You got to go into this game not overlooking Mizzou, because if you do, you can lose. So being optimistic, I've got Auburn Tigers 4-0.
Now, how about this, Shane? LSU comes to town. One of the best, rivalries here in the SEC West. Auburn, LSU. Auburn got the win in Death Valley, first time in 20-some-odd years last season. Do they beat LSU 2 in a row?
They do, Mike. Again, I think LSU's got a lot of talent. I just don't think they found themselves yet. And, it's going to take – they're going to have some growing pains. I'm not saying that Auburn's not, but we're talking optimistic here. We've got a program that's 4-0 that's already beat a top 10 team. Auburn's back in the top 25. That's how quick you get the respect in the SEC, and you do that by beating teams like LSU. So I'm going with the win for the Auburn Tigers here.
Ooh, how about next week, Shane?
It's a coin toss. Now, I want to be straight. We're being optimistic. It's a coin toss game right now, in my opinion. So anytime I'm trying to be optimistic for one team or the other, I'm going to pick that team. I think this is going to be one of the best football games that we'll see this year. And right now I'm going to go with Auburn just because I'm being optimistic.
Why do you hate LSU, Shane? Is it because they play Tennessee this year?
I hate Notre Dame so much that no.
Now, how about the next game? Ooh, tricky one, Shane. At Georgia. I mean, it's hard to see anybody beating the Dogs in Athens. You know what?
I know. I sound like a robot here. There's nobody beating Georgia. Georgia is. I mean, even it's going to be it would take I mean, everything, brother. It would take possible injuries. It would take the stars aligned. It would take out some breakout plays on special teams, potentially one of these, secondary interceptions. I still don't – I can't optimistically say Auburn has a shot against Georgia because they are that good. Unfortunately, the Tigers take their first loss here.
Now, tricky game the following week, Shane, at Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you like in that one? Auburn at Ole Miss.
Mike, this is another one. I call it a coin toss game because right now I think these two programs, it's tough to predict who I think is going to be winning. Even this far out, I would imagine this is a 3-4 point game if you're looking out of Vegas. So if they get right, because you're coming off a loss, and those are always tough, man, especially when you thought you maybe had a shot to beat the Georgia Bulldogs. It's that hangover, that hungover feeling. You don't want that. Nobody likes that. But I think they get this ship right. I think Brian. That's one thing about Auburn, man. They got their back against the wall. Yeah. The world is on them. They want Brian to fail. They want to be looking for a new coach. This locker room feels that. And I think coming into this season, that's the kind of attitude you're going to have from this group, that it's us against the world. And if they keep playing the way we know they can play and play Auburn football, there's a real shot that these guys are going to upset a lot of teams. And that does include this week. I think they get it right. Auburn gets the victory here.
Was that Brian Harsin just showed up at your door there, Shane?
Yeah, I owe him some money.
Now, how about this one? They got 2 weeks to prepare. Tricky game, though. Arkansas comes to Jordan-Hare Stadium. Yeah. Who do you like in that one? Arkansas at Auburn.
Oh, Mike. I try to be optimistic. I am.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not a coin toss game, in my opinion. This is a game that Auburn's just not there yet. I think it hinges on how far Calzada comes. I think it hinges a little bit on how much production this defense really did bring back this season. But when I look at Arkansas's roster, optimistically, I cannot see them winning this game. I think it would be close for a little bit, but Arkansas has a little bit too much depth, in my opinion, and a hell of a quarterback. So, Unfortunately, I've got Auburn losing this game.
Yeah, how about this? Another tricky one. Auburn at Mississippi State was kind of the beginning of the end for Auburn last year. Could they go into Starkville and combat them cowbells and come out with a win?
Yeah, because they can do it. They can beat this team. They've got when you look at teams a little bit different than Arkansas, I just don't think they pair well together. This one they do. What Mississippi State's good at, Arkansas is good at stopping. What they're bad at, what you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, sorry,
Auburn.
All these beers are kicking in now. But I say that to say this, Mike. Optimistically, I think Auburn can beat Mississippi State. Neutral field, or it doesn't matter where it's at. It could be. Where's this one at? Is that Mississippi State?
At Mississippi State.
That's the only kicker right there. But I'm still going to give Auburn the edge here.
Now, how about the next one, Shane? Texas A&M comes to Auburn, so at least you get the home field advantage. But that's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, this is one of those, brother. You just gotta pray everything goes right, and I just don't think it does. So, unfortunately, Auburn is just not in the same ballpark of A&M.
Now, how about this? Should be an easy one. Western Kentucky comes to Auburn. That's a win, right?
Oh yeah, this is definitely a win. You should always beat the Hilltoppers and that dumbass mascot of theirs that they feel like needs too much airtime. You know what I'm saying? Every time I get on there, that's like they're looking at this guy dancing. It's like I've never seen a mascot get as much airtime as this goofy thing. But yeah, this is they got cool helmets, but it's a terrible team. You should win this one.
Now, last one. I don't know how optimistic you are on this one. Auburn at Alabama. Games in Tuscaloosa. Any chance pulling the stunner? Well,
Mike, yeah, there was a chance last year, and we're still talking about Brian getting fired. So this game, you could kind of throw a lot of that out. but you can't. You know what I'm saying? It's like I would be nuts, even optimistically thinking Auburn has a shot to win this game. But every time you say that, there's a miracle. There's an upset. There's a 101-yard punt return, field goal return. You know, it's just there's always something, a batted pass, and next thing you know, Auburn's winning the game. So you can't rule it out. But if you're a gambling man, yeah, I've got Alabama winning this one.
So even optimistically, you got Auburn at 8-4.
Yeah,
and that's not the expectation certainly, but I honestly think a lot of Auburn fans, given all the offseason issues, I think they take 8-4 at this point in time, don't you?
What would you have them at?
I kind of lean more towards 7-5 because I don't think, like you said, Georgia, Alabama, A&M, I just don't see them winning those games. So there's your 3 automatic losses. And then I've got a couple of games here listed as toss-ups, Shane. Penn State at home, LSU at home, at Ole Miss, Arkansas at home, and at Mississippi State. So you're just not going to win that many toss-ups. So I'm trying to, again, we're keeping this optimistic. I'm giving 3 of the 5 toss-ups. So for me, it's 7-5 would be the record.
Okay. And I think they'd love it. I think they would be good with 7 or 8, Maybe. I don't know. Would you? You're Auburn. I'm expecting 12 wins if I'm Auburn. I want to be back to the West Championship. I don't want the Iron Bowl to be a miracle needed. I want it to be just a good ball game. So I hate it for them. I really do, because I can relate, that you win a national championship in your lifetime, you expect to keep going back. And, sometimes it feels like you drift further away when you're an Auburn Tiger fan. So I need something. The fans need something this year, brother. They really do. They need this locker room to play better than they are. And if they can do that, man, if they can come out and stop making excuses and just get to freaking work, you know what I'm saying? Right. Auburn can make some noise and they can be fun again. I truly believe it.
Now, last question I got for you, Shane, on Auburn. Bigger game, in your opinion, for the season, Missouri or the following week LSU? Because the way I look at it, you obviously always want to beat LSU.
Yeah.
But I think if you lose it, you could say, well, hell, that's one of the best programs in the country. I think if Auburn loses Missouri, they're probably going to lose LSU, and then it's going to snowball Georgia at Ole Miss. I mean, I think the season more or less hinges on beating the Missouri Tigers. It just feels like a game that Auburn fans, they feel like this team should not even compete with us at home. To me, Missouri is the biggest game of the year.
It's a huge game, Mike, and obviously Penn State's a big game because everybody's going to be watching it. But that bounce back game, if you lose, how do you bounce back? And I don't think Auburn's one of those programs that can bounce back from a loss with Mizzou. In fact, we've talked about this in podcast. Here you are. You bring me back to the dark side. I'm trying to be positive, and you want me to. I'm firing Brian again. So I'm just saying it's a very crucial game because of its timing. Because worst case scenario, you lose to Penn State, you gotta bounce back. And if you beat Penn State, you got to keep the motivation and momentum rolling, and you do that with Mizzou. That easily could be overlooked. So it's a trap game. And at one direction, and then it's a rebound game in another. And if you lose it in either way, you lose to Mizzou because that fan base is expecting you to beat the Tigers. Right. Mizzou knows that they've got talent. Mizzou knows that they have an opportunity to beat Auburn. But Auburn fans, they're not realistic when it comes to that. I talk to a lot of them, man. They're diehard fans. They have high expectations, and they should, rightfully so. So yeah, that's a tough game and a tough timing. So that's the one I've got an asterisk by as well.
Well, hey, buddy, we've gone incredibly long on this one, so let's cut this thing off. You got anything else before we hop off the line?
Yeah, real quick. Best offensive player, Tank?
Got to be Tank.
Okay, defense?
Defense, I'm going to go with my man Derek Hall on the defensive line.
Okay, I'm saying Popo. I think this is the year he reminds everybody why he was one of the top recruits coming out. And then if you're picking the Heisman, you're going Tank again?
Oh, yeah, I think that's the only option here.
All right, I'm going Tank as well.
Well,
maybe Calzada. Dark horse. Calzada.
Dark horse?
He finds his receiver. Yeah.
All right, we're being optimistic, so I'm not gonna shoot that down. Not on this episode, but hey, that's gonna do it, buddy, for another fall camp preview. I think we're 5 down, 11 to go. A race to SEC Media Days. Cannot wait. I hope everyone's appreciating all this great content. Shane, I know I sure do appreciate you for continuing to show up. It's 4th of July. Fireworks going off in the background. Shay's showing up for these podcasts. I cannot thank you enough, and I cannot thank each and every one of you for continuing to support the show. But that is going to do it for this episode. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right. See you guys. War Damn Eagle.